Professor Ibe Olayinka, ably represented by the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Innovation, and the other allied matters. The Dean of Arts, the pioneer Dean of the University of Ibadan, our own Professor Da Silva, the Director of CETEL, eminent professors here present, Professor Falola, distinguished professor, Deputy Vice Chancellor here present, and my own very dear friend, Professor Clement Olusegun Oladiran Konagoni. My own HOD here as well. Distinguished professors including my teachers who are present here. Yes, you know, some people will be surprised that I also had my root in the Faculty of Arts. Yes, there are professors who taught me here, Professor Itadi, and a few of them are still around. Other colleagues present here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased actually to be here this morning. When the Dean contacted me that I will be giving a keynote address at this program, I reflected back about 10 years ago. I remember very well that the College of Medicine wanted to enter into a review of their curriculum. And they invited me, I was a senior lecturer, and they invited me to the college to come and start, they wanted to start their review. And when I stood in front of the whole college, I was looking. When you see all these pediatric professors, everybody, I said, what is all this? But when I started with them, starting with what we mean by curriculum change, curriculum innovation, they were looking at us. But I want to say, categorically actually, that experience helped our College of Medicine, University of Ibadan, to be among the first College of Medicine in Nigeria to review their curriculum comprehensively. It was something that they did, and also it was on record that it also gingered the review across this university. Because over the years, our people will be sitting down and they will think, look, what are they doing in the Faculty of Education there? But we have come to realize that the Faculty of Education actually is supposed to even service all the other faculties in the university. There is no university you will get to, except in Nigeria, where somebody will just get a PhD and you will deploy the best person to the classroom, just like that. Even as a senior lecturer in education, when I got to the University of Botswana, I was still taking through the mills of their teaching processes. But in Nigeria, we just felt that to get a PhD, you deploy the people. And I've been saying it. It has, well, the Dean said it has been working for us, but we see now the need for us to, and when outsiders are now coming, because I had a meeting with the NUC Executive Secretary just a week ago. Outsiders are now being employed as consultants to come and teach university professors in Nigeria on pedagogy. When we have the Faculty of Education, Pioneer Faculty of Education, University of Ibadan, and even across the country. But when the Dean of Arts actually called me, my mind, I was very, very happy. And I said, this is the way to go for our university. And I start with a quotation by a former dean of this faculty, and that's Professor Mele. He says about Faculty of Arts, he says the faculty provides a high quality education in the humanities and explores collaborative links with units, bodies and institutions within and outside Nigeria. With the advantage of critical thinking gained from the education in the arts, the faculty continues to generate creative and original ideas that help to provide new solutions to the problems of development in Africa. We stay at the vanguard of developing employment and life skills through a clear focus on programs that are sensitive to the dynamics of cultural, social, historical, linguistics needs of the society. But when I look at that good mission and vision for the faculty, I said to meet up with the unique focus of this faculty, we need to revisit the approach to the process of classroom instruction, because most of our students are not ready to learn, and even when the lecturers are even ready to teach and ready to discharge their function. This topic, therefore, that has been chosen, offers an opportunity to consider the keys to unlocking the effective and innovative approach as to teaching and learning in the arts and humanities. Like William Arthur Ward said, the mediocre teacher tells. The mediocre teacher does what? Tells. The good teacher explains. The superior teacher demonstrates. Whereas the great teacher inspires. Our focus is on being great teachers, and that should be our focus. Not only to tell, not only to explain and to demonstrate, but to inspire our students to learn. That should be the focus of every academic. But I tried to x-ray our situation, and the first thing that came to my mind was that if I asked every one of us here, maybe only a few of us can tell me that you as a person, whether you are a professor or even a young lecturer, you have what we call a teaching philosophy. I don't know how many of us can boldly say that this is my teaching philosophy. Because in some other clients, before you teach, you have a profile, you develop your profile. And part of your profile that will be in your folder will be your teaching philosophy. That's the basic thing. But here, who will ask us in the first instance? Who will ask us? But that is number one thing. What is your teaching philosophy? And that will tell me the kind of lecturer that you will be. The Faculty of Arts is a broad-based, high-level competence center of humanities. It is a center of excellence in research and teaching of ethno-national research disciplines, the languages, history, and culture of a people. The teaching philosophy is a self-reflective statement. It is a self-reflective statement of beliefs about teaching and learning. It should also discuss how the beliefs are put into practice by including concrete examples of what to do or anticipate doing in the classroom. When you develop your profile, your teaching profile, your philosophy, your teaching philosophy, it should be able to guide us on to know the kind of route that your teaching comes from. And you should be able to also tell us how you are going to practicalize some of these ideas in your classroom. You should be able to enumerate them in your teaching philosophy. I said, what are the components of a teaching philosophy? Number one, you have the theoretical bedrocks of the belief system and how the belief system affects decisions such as selection of materials, teaching strategies, and classroom management. You should also have a description of what to do in the classroom. Why doing things that way? If you ask most of us, why do you do this thing in the classroom? Well, we just do it. Whereas most of the things we do, actually we do them right. But the only problem is that we cannot give the reason why we are doing them. We may be doing the correct thing, but you don't know the reason. There's a philosophical underpinning that explains what we are doing. But you may not be able to know if you don't, plan yourself and you don't have a teaching philosophy that one can easily go to. Teachers and students, your teaching philosophy should also be able to show us what are the roles of both teachers and that of the students. And when do teachers use, what do you use in the classroom and how it enhances learning. Your teaching philosophy should also encompass classroom dynamics, rapport, and classroom atmosphere. Methods of assessment, and I know later on we are going to get to our assessment because it's one thing. I've been telling 5 chancellors of universities, because look, it's obvious our colleagues, they will just when they say student CA, continual assessment, their own thinking of continual assessment purely is that at the end of the semester you just quickly arrange something and you give one test to the student, and that's what they call continual assessment. It's not done. That is not continual assessment. For goodness sake, they will say anybody, the student reach CA. How can a student reach CA? They will not put 0. What is that supposed to mean? It's wrong. By its name, continuous assessment means a continuous repetitive practice. That's what we are supposed to do. Minimum about 3, including even class attendance. And that's why sometimes you will not see any student fail in a class. But here, a lecturer will go to the classroom and say 70% is my home. Then what kind of a teacher is that? That's why there's a difference between a teacher and a cheater. Check the inaugural lecture of O'Brien. Teacher and cheaters. Your teaching philosophy should also reflect teachers' flexibility in working within the needs. And let me say this, it's not because I'm in TRC here that I'm saying this. Even while I was here, I wanted to print a copy of my course outline so that people will see that it's not just that I'm saying it here. It's on my system in the office there. You know, you have your name, you have your office address, you have your phone number. So that when students want to call, they can call you. You have a course description, you have the outline, you have the assessment procedure, and even you describe the methodology you are going to use in the classroom. In my course outline, all these things are reflected. Before I go to the list of references, they are all there. And when I was HOD for just 1 year, I made sure I was telling colleagues to submit their course outlines to the head of HOD's office. Yes. In some other clients, these are taken for granted. It's only that here we feel too big. For HOD should demand for course outlines from their lecturers. You should demand. They should submit their course outlines to the HOD's office because you may not be there tomorrow. What if something happens? Somebody may want to complete that course. The person will need to refer to something, and that's the course outline. And that course outline should be detailed enough to tell us everything that we are going to do, including strategies and methods we are going to use in the classroom, including the assessment procedure, so that your students will be able to carry them along, including even the dates. You will do maybe you are doing this CA test and things. You must put the date. Because if the student miss the date of your test in some other places, you will repeat it. But if you have announced it through your course outline, nobody can hold you for it. And your teaching philosophy is a document in progress. It's a document in progress. It's not there's no finality about it. There's something that you should be able to look at any time, and maybe your thinking is changing regarding, or your views are changing and all this kind of thing. It's a document in progress that you should be able to review. As your teaching changes and your professional identity grows, your teaching philosophy will also change and grow. As you mature on the job, your teaching philosophy will also grow with you and will mature with you. Revisit and rewrite it as your beliefs and experiences progress and change. Consequently, every faculty needs to develop their teaching philosophy. By faculty, I think every academic staff needs to develop their teaching philosophy, focusing on what they expect their students to learn. Typically, when teachers are given the opportunity to develop a module or course, they tend to start with the content. The teaching metaphor learns to reform around covering the subject area. That's what our people, yes, I have my course outline. They just use the topic and they will tell you that I finished the topic. No, that's not the basic thing. In fact, when my professor was discussing with me, if it's in education, there's a difference between curriculum, scheme of work, syllabus, before you now get to lesson notes or notes of lesson. Curriculum is the nebulous thing, the white thing. Then you have the syllabus which only contains the topic that you are going to teach. The scheme of work is a breakdown of these topics into weekly activities. Then your notes of lesson typifies what you are going to teach in a particular lesson period. It is important to note that in designing teaching philosophy, we need to think about what we want the students to learn rather than what we want to teach. The focus is not on you. The focus is on what the students should learn and not what I want to teach. I remember very well the popular saying in those days when somebody challenged university academics and said that you should pay what you are supposed to teach. You know, you should teach what you are paid to teach. I remember the post in there that I'm the only one that can determine. You know, but actually, you know, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about those students. It's about those students, and that's the real thing. And I also take out because I know that people will come and talk later on. I was looking at innovative approach to teaching and learning. I said inquiry-based learning is a learner center. These are what some of the things that you can do, where students are deeply engaged in learning process of inquiry and problem-solving activities. As its name implies, to inquire means to find out. You know, let the learners go and this is very, very plausible in the faculty of arts. This is an area where learners should be left on their own to go and find out so many things. And they come back with an enriched knowledge. When they go to society, when they what if it's about our notes only, you know, it's not going to work. We're supposed to allow these learners, allow our students to go and explore, to inquire. Inquiry-based learning has its roots in constructivist educational philosophy and is focused on three major components: exploration and discovery problem, authentic investigation using contextualized learning, and then research-based approach. I said in the technologically advanced world, which we refer to as 21st century, students' learning strategies have to change to the 21st century learning. That's the basic thing. We just have to change. You know, I normally tell our teachers, member of TLC, that you know they can no longer afford to be BBC teachers. You know the BBC teachers, the born before computer teachers. They can no longer afford to be born before computer teachers. I remember very well some years past in this university when they brought the computers. Some of our colleagues just covered the team until he gathered dust. And he said, "You are not using this." He said, "No. What is it all about?" They thought, some people thought it was television out there. So, you know, you cannot afford, as a 21st century teacher, you cannot afford to be a BBC teacher. You have to be technologically compliant, for goodness sake. You know, new knowledge keeps on pouring in daily, rendering old ones obsolete and outdated. And as a 21st century teacher, you have to key in into the word of knowledge, the current word of knowledge. And so it's not possible for you to be a neighbor in technology. And you say we are preparing. And that's why some people will challenge the kind of outcomes that we come from our places. So we cannot afford, as a 21st century, we have 21st century learners. And that's why people are no longer, you know, concentrating on this content and everything. They are talking of the skills. 21st century skills. What we call life skills. And as a 21st century teacher, we can focus on the following: the ability to teach to all learners. Ability to teach to all learners. You see, in our classroom, you have different categories of learners. In your classroom, in that singular classroom, you have different categories of learners. You have those, and they learn through so many different means. And as a teacher that is a 21st century teacher, you must be able to learn how to teach to all of them. There are some who can learn through, so you know, just practicals. There are some who can, you know, they learn through so many means. And nobody should be left behind in your classroom. You should be able to implement technology in teaching. At this stage, I know that the University of Ibadan has crossed this kind of border. I know that a majority of our colleagues now even use so many of these technology to teach, to handle their classrooms. But it is important that the faculty should ensure that we upgrade that from 70%, if we are 70 now, we should be able to move to about 90% of our colleagues who will be able to, you know, use technology to mediate technology into their teaching, so that ultimately we'll be able to get a large number of our colleagues that will be able to master and present their instruction through the use of technology. Also, you should be able to foster student relationship. That's another thing as a 21st century teacher. In a technologically advancing world where students can account for the number of friends they have through Facebook and other social media platforms, a professional and effective teacher can facilitate interpersonal relationships within the classroom so that students can communicate with their peers on a higher level than just social media. Instead of us allowing them to use it to do so many things, at least we'll be able to use those instruments. I was able to follow some of our colleagues in this same faculty who were using the WhatsApp group, to facilitate the learning through on this distance learning program. I remember very well, there was a colleague from the Department of Language Arts who was using that, and I was very impressed when I saw it. You know, these are things we can use. They are common now. Most of our students use very highly expensive phones that they can accommodate some of these things. You know, you can create, your own places whereby they drop their assignment, they drop so many things, you download, you grade, and you give them feedback, even through some of these platforms. And as a 21st century teacher, we need to embrace change for effective learning. Also, we need to establish effective teacher-student interaction. I know this is waning these days. When some of us were students, at least the mentorship was very, very good. In fact, it got to some level. Some people will know that I was even introduced to the club by my own teacher. Yes. In fact, it got to a level, even at the PhD, my professor will not cross any line in my thesis until I'm sitting down. Because he will say, I don't know why you are putting down. Can you defend it? Then we would chat. It's not that you cross somebody's work and say, take your work back. No, that was not it. It got to that level, but for some time, maybe because so many factors came into play and mentorship gone down. But I think we have to pick it up. And I know that there are some colleagues in the Faculty of Arts actually who are promoting mentorship. And part of what Professor Father is also doing is also to make sure that we bring up younger ones so that, because very soon some of us will leave this stage. And it depends on the people you have mentored. It depends on the day my professor was going to leave this country. It was like a dream. And he said, oh boy, you are taking over. Yes, Abdul Mansari. He said, oh boy, you are taking over. And I look at it. If I have not been prepared very well, I was not, it would have been a very big challenge for me. Because a whole unit of the department was just left into my hands. Another thing I want to look at is about professional ethics in humanity. Professional ethics refer to all issues involving ethics and values in the role of profession in society. Ethics in the profession constitutes repository of their social and cultural values and the medium of their historical memory. Teachers today in the Faculty of Arts and General Humanities are faced with challenges of balancing local, national, and global norms. I know, because we have so many interplay. You have the local norms, you have the national norms, you have the global norms. And teachers in the Faculty of the Humanities are faced with this big challenge of how to balance this three. And moral, as well as moral, and including ethical values in the process of educating students. To achieve this, professional teachers shall base their relationship with students on mutual trust and respect, have regard to the safety and well-being of students under their responsibility, respect the uniqueness and diversity of the learning community they are part of, and work in a collaborative manner with colleagues and other professionals. I know this is one thing that's also very difficult, working collaboratively with colleagues. With the joint publication and things like that, I'm sure this is being reduced. But you see, it's been proven that actually, when you want to walk fast, you walk alone. But when you want to walk far, you walk with others. If you want to walk fast, you walk alone. But when you want to walk far, you walk with others. And so when you collaboratively work with others who are in your area, and even people who are not in your area, you can explore the whole university. I think this is an opportunity for us. And then you take responsibility for maintaining the quality of their professional practice, uphold public trust and confidence in the teaching profession, and finally create learning experiences which engage, motivate, and challenge students in an inclusive setting. You know, there are some lecturers that students will never want to miss their classes. They will not want to miss they are always there. Not because of anything, the way, maybe delivery, so many things come into play, and students will just take, into that person. Over the years, there's one name in Ife that up to now nobody can forget, and that's Jingo. Dipo Fashino took that name just from his class, philosophy class. And I was surprised when we got to Ogun State one day, and the governor wanted to misbehave to us. And my friend Demola Remu wanted to rescue the governor. And when we said we cannot stand with this man to talk with him, the secretary to the state government, Olaoluwa, prostrated flatly in front of Jingo and said, "I'm sorry, sir. Let me apologize on his behalf." So you taught me in year one in Ife. And that is the kind of respect that we have for our teachers. But it depends. Will students run away from your class, or will they, flock into your class? So many of these things come into play. At the level of the Teachers Professional Council of Nigeria, we develop what we call professional standards for Nigerian teachers. And in this professional standard for Nigerian teachers, we are looking at 4 basic things. We are looking at professional knowledge, which I am very sure is not in doubt among our colleagues. We are looking at professional knowledge. We are looking at professional skills. And this is why we come in, including pedagogical skills. How to deliver. Somebody, there was this argument, which one is more important? Is it what to teach or how to teach it? The argument was raging, but Brannon, 1964, presented what we call a common sense view. He said what to teach is as important as how to teach it. Some of our past mathematics lecturers are not, it's not because they were not good, those mathematics teachers in school. It's because they do not know how to present it. They were good on their own, they were very brilliant. But they don't know, and the same thing applies even when we get to this level. Some of our lecturers are very brilliant, they are first-class lecturers. But delivery is the challenge. So what to teach is as well as important as how to teach it. And then we are talking of professional values, attitude, and conduct, professional conduct. And finally, we are also looking at professional obligations. But let me come to the final part of it, which is about assessment. And this is very important. Like I said when I started, it gives me a big challenge. Assessment is very, very critical. They'll say, when they see the number of students that after first year, that we say advised to withdraw from our universities, it speaks volumes. Because it tells, so much about us as well. That means we have not been able to do certain things that we're supposed to do. Because if we compare the number of students we say advised to withdraw in our university, we kind of, look, when we talk of institutional efficiency, Professor Falola is here. When you talk of institutional efficiency, you measure it in terms of number of input, process, and output. The number of years a student takes to graduate in the university is factored into the institutional efficiency. It's factored into it. And so when you have your students that stay longer and all this kind of thing, your institutional efficiency goes down. It goes down. In some other places, they will also call you as a lecturer because we do ratings. They rate all the lecturers within the class, all the lecturers in the department. They will compare your own scores with other colleagues. Especially when they use SECA, the Student Evaluation of Content and Teaching. When they use the Student Evaluation of Content and Teaching and you see yourself, you will also know where you stand. And they compare you with other colleagues, they will do the analysis. At no cost, the university has a facility for doing it. So the aspect of evaluation very, very critical. And thank God, the university has increased the CA now in this university to 40, I think. Yes, it's not 40. And that's to help us so that at least we give repetitive tests. We, like we said before, you start your teaching, you have what you call pre-assessment. Okay, to know where the students stand, how do their entry, what we call their entry behavior. It will help you, that will guide you to be able to know where to start with them and how to start with them. Then within the period of your teaching as well, during the middle of you can also give another assessment. We call it, you can call it diagnostic, diagnostic assessment or what do they call it? Like medical doctors, we call it diagnostic. Like when they are diagnosing you for. Or they call it formative as well. Okay, to be able to know whether the students are actually following you or they are not following you. And finally, you can also do the summative evaluation. We are using these terms interchangeably, although they do not mean the same thing. But for the purpose of this meeting, we can use it. We can use it. When we get to the Faculty of Education, they will say evaluation is not the same thing as assessment. Because they are different. They are different, really. We have as evaluation, we have measurement, we have assessment, and we have evaluation. Measurement is just about assigning figures to something. When you measure, you can measure a cloth, you can measure length, you assign. Then assessment, you can use that measure to do one or two things. To say, hey, if you measure this one, you say this one falls within category. Then when you use the assessment and the measurement to pass judgment, that's what we call evaluation. Evaluation is a nebulous thing and is judgmental in nature. But for purpose of this summit, you can use it the same way. But let us look at what we do. Let us look at what we do. Not only when you set your questions, you should also have the marking guide. So that you can do iterator. Somebody can also take, and that's why I like what they do in some other faculties, that you will just mark one question, and then another person will come and mark another question and things like that. So that one person will not just be all in all, and that he can do everything. In conclusion, let me say that the Faculty of Arts and Humanities generally has a great role to play in shaping the society by teaching the right norms, values and ethics to the students. Due to the fast-changing society through technological advancement, the 21st century teachers need to change. We cannot remain the same. We need to change along to ensure that effective and innovative teaching and learning takes place in our classroom. This can be achieved through effective faculty teachers with students, interaction, applying innovative 21st century teaching strategies, and employing appropriate students assessment tools. Thank you very much, and God bless you.